All right, so let me introduce, well, let's see, we've got, was it 2 sessions left? We've got this one, plus one more, plus then we got the big prize giveaway, and then don't forget, there's the after-hours networking thing that's going on from 5:30 to 7:30 after this. There's a little tour of ITology. Did I mention free beer earlier?
That's freedom.
Yes. We know how much you like free. Look at that. There were people, it's like that old cartoon where they talk about, it was a Far Side cartoon. It was about the dog, and it says what the man says, ginger, what the dog hears, ginger, blah, 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 ginger. In this case, it was free beer, blah, 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 free beer, blah, 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 free beer. That's what you heard. So anyway, there's free beer and heavy hors d'oeuvres and some great networking and a neat event after this at the end of the day. And there's buses going back and forth for those who are staying at the hotel. And they'll just take you over to ITology and back. So, I mean, it's perfect. It's free beer, heavy hors d'oeuvres, and prizes, and designated driver. I mean, we're set. We're set. It's going to be a good evening. All right, so for the next hour or 40-some minutes, and by the way, Jim, I'm going to have there's going to be a countdown clock somewhere over there. Okay. I'm going to flip it around. You'll watch it counting down.
Perfect.
And, most guys, they just ignore it. But let me tell you.
Really? I haven't noticed that at all.
You haven't.
Has anyone noticed that at all?
It counts down, and then it turns red, and then it counts up.
Right.
But you know what? No one notices. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jim Jagielski, and he is the president of the Apache Software Foundation and a senior consulting software engineer with Red Hat, Inc. And you might want to applaud for him.
Please, I haven't finished yet, so, Anyway, first of all, thank you all for attending. I know we're getting kind of late in the game today, and so it really is kind of heartwarming to see so many people out here today, especially on something as much of a commodity as the Apache Web Server. And we were talking about that a little bit this morning, what a commodity is. And for a lot of people, it's like, the web server, oh my God, I know what the web server is. So what? What's the big deal? What's so new? What's cool about it and stuff like that? Well, what's interesting, as we'll see, is that the cloud has a lot of dependencies, a lot of requirements that places a lot of design factors on what a web server needs to do. And so with Apache 2.4, we tried to anticipate some of those and add those inside there. So we'll talk about that. A little bit about me. I have talked a lot about the various hats and positions I wear, but I really consider myself an open source developer at heart. I mean, that's where I came from. So even though I've got this presidential role and stuff like that, I'm really a developer. I've been hacking on Apache since '95 or so. So, so the stuff that I do, administratively is a result of my involvement in open source. It isn't the genesis of my start in open source. So some of the things we'll talk about with the Apache Web Server itself are some of the performance-related enhancements that we've made to the actual web server itself, as well as some of the enhancements made in the reverse proxy capability for Apache. Because really, when you think about it, a lot in the cloud, what you're using a web tier front end for is basically proxying to something on the back end, either an application server, a static image server, or something like that. So having flexibility and freedom and capability at that layer, being a reverse proxy gateway, is very, very important. So you'll see that when we started doing the enhancements and stuff like that for Apache, why we did that. Okay, right now, Apache 2.4 is currently in a beta release. It had been in an alpha release for several months. I actually had the first formal beta release maybe about 2 weeks ago. If you followed the mailing lists at all or stuff like that, you would have noticed that. And then hopefully have another beta by the end of this month, beginning of April or so. The time frame is we really hope to have a GA version available by May. We realize it's been a long time since we had an update to Apache out there. So we really think that this makes, this is good timing. A lot of this work is also due to just the huge amount of traction and interest you've seen in the cloud. So, a lot of people from IBM who are also developers, at the ASF have been pumping code into here. Myself with Red Hat been pumping code in here. So you'll see that we still maintain our roots to the open source community, but we're also realizing that there are some key features and design drivers that a web server in the enterprise location needs to worry about. So we factor those in there as well. And so I noticed the two big key features are high performance and cloud suitability, and we'll talk about those a little bit later on. But before we do, some people may say, what is so important about design and performance improvements inside of a web server, especially in the cloud environment? I mean, in traditional NOC environments, one could make a case theoretically for Apache versus Nginx, for example, because right there you're looking at static resources, and you need to get the most bang for the buck out of out of that server, out of that resource. Well, the cloud kind of like changes that drastically, because as you get more incoming traffic, the cloud will dynamically and magically add those resources to you. So as a sysadmin, you don't really have to worry about the pain that's involved in spinning up a new server and stuff like that. You just want to make sure that you're actually able to handle it. And that also changes the complexion as well, because at that point, you're not so much worried about a web server that's able to handle a whole bunch of concurrent requests. What you're really worried about is a web server that can very, very quickly get that request response cycle very, very tight, very, very clean. You need to reduce that latency as much as possible. And you'll see that some of the old web servers that were good for high concurrency in traditional NOC environments, because of that latency issue, are no longer really in a lot of cases, the right choices for cloud kinds of environments. Because what they sacrificed for that high concurrency was some internal latency that the cloud kind of like takes away from you now. So some of the things that we've added to try to improve performance, reduce that latency, as well as improve concurrency as well, because even though the cloud is there, you do spin up another instance, you do have to pay for it somewhere. It's not for free. So we did need to include better support for I/O, the traditional event-based processing that you see in Lite and Nginx and things like that. Well, the next version of Apache will include that as well. It also includes, implements all these by these entities called MPMs, which are multi-processing modules. Now, how many people here are actually familiar with Apache, use Apache and stuff like that? Just a quick show of hands. Okay. Of you, how many are using the old 1.3 model? Okay, great, good, because that's been long deprecated. How about 2.0? 2.2? Okay, great. So the main idea behind Apache and this concept of NPM was that instead of a one-size-fits-all solution for your web server, this is how it grows, this is how it scales, this is how it handles requests. The NPM allowed the sysadmin to figure out what they wanted to do. Do they want a system that pre-forked, it was process-based? Do they want something that was thread-based? Those are those aren't always the right decision depending on what kind of loading you're seeing and stuff like that. And so we added additional NPMs, the asynchronous model, the event-based NPM and stuff like that, to provide more flexibility, more freedom. So even though Apache does have this new asynchronous model, if it doesn't make sense in your environment, you don't need to worry about it. You can still stick with the same NPM you've been using. Also, Apache is designed with this lower level abstraction layer called APR, the Apache Portable Runtime Library. And it's basically like a super POSIX implementation. It's designed so Apache can make one regular function call to open a file or something like that. And APR determines the most efficient and most effective way of doing that on whatever operating system it's working on. So if you're doing it in Linux, then it makes sense to open it, use send file if possible to send it and things like that. Implementation may be different on FreeBSD. It's definitely different on OS X, and it's significantly different on Windows. Well, instead of having a developer having to, say if def, Windows, then this is the call. Apache just says open a file, and APR takes care of all that lower level mundane stuff. So there's a very tight dependency between Apache and APR. Now, the later versions of APR are much more compliant. They've been really, really heavily tuned for things like, table lookups and stuff like that. So just out of the box, if we just use the old version of Apache with the newer version of APR, you'd see a significant performance increase. Another couple things that people use Apache for a lot, they have to go, outside of the Apache tree to grab, for example, bandwidth control. You used to have to go to like, mod BW or mod C-band or something like that. These are external modules not provided by the ASF. You would have to go and download those and build them yourself. Well, we have a rate limiter module now inside Apache itself. It comes standard with the protocol. It's got a really, really good test case associated with it, a lot of good heritage. The idea being that it's very bare bones right now, but of course, as we get more feedback from users, the idea is to enhance that. Okay, what features do the user community want? What features do the sysadmin community need? And try to fold that back in to make sure that module makes more sense. There's also finer levels of control, especially on requests coming in. Right now, it's basically like a timeout that says once a packet comes in, you wait, 5 seconds or 30 seconds until the request is finalized. Well, there are a bunch of denial of service attacks that basically send a quick byte of information, and then after a couple minutes or so, send another byte, or a couple seconds, and send another byte, basically to tie up a resource inside there. And so what we do is we have a module in there that says, okay, this is how long you wait for the initial request, that GET request from somebody. If there's post data, this is how long you wait for that request to come in. Again, a lot more capability and flexibility for sysadmins to avoid any kind of problems that might be coming around. We also include the concept of buffering of all I/O. If you're familiar with the design of Nginx, for example, they use that a lot. In a lot of cases, it's much quicker for the underlying operating system to, instead of pull data off the wire and keep it into memory and then ship it out back on the wire, it's quicker to go and pull it and put it on a file someplace and then have the kernel take care of it. Sometimes it's a lot quicker. The application is able to pull away from that task a lot quicker because it says, okay, I wrote the file, and it immediately gets a return from the kernel that says, yep, you wrote it all right. And the application can keep on doing what it's doing while the kernel takes care of doing the underlying stuff while it's still writing. So we're able to provide this kind of buffering capability both for input as well as output. So again, flexibility to be able to provide more control over it. And another thing that we have included with 2.4 is that, I'm guessing most of the people who are using Apache as web servers and even as application servers are using it with PHP, for example, as a front end to Rails or Python or something like that. And the problem with that is that historically, especially when you run these applications inside the server itself, inside the server address space, it bloats up the size of Apache. Apache is very, very large because it's got to load in that entire interpreter in to be able to run your PHP application. Lua is a really nice, quick, very, very elegant programming language specifically designed for handling of large strings of characters, which, of course, that's basically what the web is about, is just, handling, huge character arrays, huge character strings and stuff like that. So it's able to, for example, handle, megabyte requests and response internally without loading down Apache itself. It's really fine-tuned for that. So the nice thing is that you'll be able to reconfigure how Apache runs and operates and handles requests by generating a couple Lua scripts that you can then embed in the configuration file.